this is the issue that has plagued the SNP, that police inquiry going on since July 2021 and still ongoing, interviewing a lot of people in the higher echelons of the party, and we are still waiting to see whether the former leader, Nicola Sturgeon herself, will be interviewed as part of that. I think the first place to start is 3 months ago. It's 3 months since Nicola Sturgeon resigned as First Minister. It's 5 weeks since, you remember those scenes of the blue tent in her front garden, that stories about the camper van, the SNP HQ being raided, as well as Nicola Sturgeon and her husband Peter Murrell's house. Peter Murrell was arrested and then released without charge. The party treasurer, a guy called Colin Beattie, was also arrested and released without charge. The story, to be fair, in the past week seemed to have died down a wee bit because there were lots of twists and turns in it. Last week, though, the Times revealed that Douglas Chapman, who was the previous treasurer, who's an MP who resigned over a lack of transparency about the party finances, he wasn't told about this famous camper van. And today, the Sunday Mail in Scotland say that detectives are looking at an Amazon shopping account, which has been used over a number of years, and examining 1,000 allegations of potential fraud. They are then also going back to a whole load of witnesses they've spoken to before, a second round of interviews. So just because we haven't heard anything recently about this just doesn't mean that it's really gone away. And this is the issue that has plagued the SNP, that police inquiry going on since July 2021 and still ongoing, interviewing a lot of people in the higher echelons of the party, and we are still waiting to see whether the former leader, Nicola Sturgeon herself, will be interviewed as part of that.
Which of course, presents a rather delicious opportunity for Alex Salmond, potentially.
Yeah, look, Alex Salmond's a significant figure in Scottish politics. He's led the SNP for 20 of the last 32 years. I mean, he was arguably the most successful SNP leader, taking them to victory in 2007, winning the majority 4 years later in the Scottish Parliament, doing as well as he did in that referendum. The past few years, to be fair, have been difficult for him. He lost his seat as an MP. He was found not guilty, you'll remember, of 12 charges of sexual assault in Scotland. But he's 68 years old now. He's generating a lot of headlines, been allowed back in, I suppose, to getting lots of exposure as a result of the troubles in the SNP. Next week he's on the BBC's Question Time, so he hasn't gone away. He leads the Alba Party, a small party, really, that's been on the fringes of nationalist politics, but is making inroads in the wider nationalist movement. Very noisy. They've got 2 MPs who defected from the SNP. Yesterday at their party conference, they announced that they've now got nearly 7,500 members. Now, that doesn't seem like many, but they're suggesting that that's more than the number of members that the Liberal Democrats or even the Conservatives have in Scotland. So it's quite an interesting picture.
It is an interesting picture, and it feels like Alex Salmond is obviously trying to mount something of a comeback. And yet, as you were just explaining, he has had a lot of problems. He had that case against him. He had all those accusations against him. Obviously, none of those did stick. However, his popularity is absolutely rock bottom. I mean, his polls is minus 47. So can you really see a way back for him?
Well, look, it's not just his influence in the polls. It's actually, one senior party member told us in the past week that he hangs around like a bad smell in the SNP. He did have some influence round about that leadership campaign. One of the candidates, Ash Regan, was described as almost the de facto Alex Salmond candidate in that election, got over 10% of the vote. He's just someone who won't go away, exerts an intellectual influence over the whole nationalist movement in terms of its direction of travel. And with all the uncertainty that's in the SNP around, for example, this police investigation, but also around the fact that they themselves don't have a direction of travel for the central reason for their being, a road to independence, Salmond and his supporters exert some intellectual influence round about any discussions that are going on that.
And John, certainly when I speak to Labour Party figures in Westminster, they are considerably more upbeat about how they see the outlook for them at the general election, taking, as they predict, multiple seats back off the SNP. Is that the way you see it?
I think that's right. Look, the landscape's changed. As we've said, those troubles in the SNP, that lack of direction, the change of leadership, not just with the leader, but, they've lost a whole number of senior figures in the SNP. Domestically, the Scottish Government isn't doing particularly well. There's lots of issues where they're performing badly. There's a huge opportunity for people, particularly on the Labour side, right, to actually make gains out of that. The difficulty is, I think whilst it's the case that many voters might have gone off the SNP, they're not quite sure whether Labour yet deserves their vote. So Labour has to get itself. It's a bit like Starmer and the Conservatives in England. I think many people in England, many voters in England have decided that the Tories don't deserve their vote, but Starmer needs to do a bit more in order to win those people. And that's where Labour are in Scotland. It certainly looks as if they could win a number of seats on the polls, doing very, very well. Some suggestions they could win up to 20 seats in Scotland, the Labour Party. That having been said, they do have some problems insofar as organisationally the Labour Party is still quite a small party up against a nationalist party who've got, 70,000 members who are organisationally very good. But certainly the picture looks much better for Labour than it has done.